I've always felt, in my own way, that even if we Romans like to hype ourselves up, and trust me, we did, it wasn't our sheer numbers that set us apart from the Spaniards, or our physical toughness that topped the Gauls, or our cleverness that beat the Carthaginians, or even our talent for the arts that outshine the Greeks. It wasn't any of that. What really made us stand out, at least from how I see it, was our sense of piety, this deep, steady belief that the universe was guided by the will of the immortal gods. That faith, that almost instinctive understanding that divine power was steering the world, is what gave Rome its edge over every other people and nation. That's something Marcus Tullius Cicero talked about when he wrote about the responses of the haruspices. Now, when we try to figure out what ancient Roman religion was actually like, it turns out most folks today misunderstand it. A lot of people think we just borrowed Greek religion and slapped different names on everything, like some sort of ancient rebranding project. Sure, Jupiter lines up with Zeus, Neptune with Poseidon, Juno with Hera, and the list goes on. But that idea doesn't really capture the truth. Venus wasn't simply Aphrodite with a new paint job, and Mars definitely wasn't just another version of Ares. Both were rooted in very different traditions and carried very different personalities. So what I want to do here is walk through what Roman religion really was, especially in its early forms, and how it diverged from Greek belief. The first Roman religious ideas came from the old Italic tribes living around the Tiber Valley. Their whole outlook was shaped by three big concepts: animism, totemism, and fetishism. Animism was the notion that the natural world was alive, full of spirits and divine presence. Back then, nobody pictured the gods as people. They didn't have human faces or bodies. Jupiter wasn't a mighty guy sitting up in the clouds. He was the sky itself. Vulcan represented fire. Ceres was the grain that fed everyone. Mars wasn't a warrior in armor. He was symbolized by something as simple and powerful as a spear. Totemism, on the other hand, centered around honoring a sacred animal ancestor. Nearly every Italic tribe had one. The Herpine and Lucanians looked to the wolf. The Picentes revered the woodpecker. The Pentri and the Claudini traced their identity to the bull and the boar. Even that famous statue of the Capitoline she-wolf nursing Romulus and Remus echoes these old totemic beliefs. Then there was fetishism, the idea that certain objects carried spiritual force or bound people together through some kind of magical connection. One of the clearest examples in Roman religion was the belief in the pledges of Rome's eternity. There were 7 sacred items, and as long as they were kept safe, people believed Rome itself would endure. These included the needle of the Mother of the Gods, stored in Cybele's temple, a sacred 4-horse chariot taken from Veii, the ashes of Orestes, Priam's scepter, the veil belonging to Priam's daughter Eleone, the Palladium from Troy, said to be a wooden statue of Minerva, and the Ancile, which was Mars's holy shield. Of course, Roman religion didn't develop in a vacuum. The Etruscans and the Greeks had enormous influence. Honestly, you just have to glance at a map to understand why. Rome sat right in the middle, Etruscans up north, Greeks down south, and both cultures traded constantly. Rome was positioned squarely between them, soaking up ideas from every direction. For a while, the Etruscans even ruled Rome during the Old Age of Kings, and plenty of their gods blended into early Roman worship. Neptune, Juno, and Minerva, for example, came to the Romans through Etruscan versions, Nethans, Uni, and Minerva. Originally, the Italic gods were just forces, not people. But the Etruscans were the ones who gave these forces human faces and bodies. And that shift created an interesting problem. Once Jupiter stopped being the sky and became a bearded man throwing lightning bolts, people naturally began asking questions. Who was he? Where did he come from? Who were his parents? His brothers and sisters? His children? These were questions the Italic tribes had never asked, because you don't exactly sit around wondering about the family tree of a lightning bolt. That's where the Greeks came in. They filled in all the blank spaces with their rich mythology. They basically handed the Romans an entire backstory and said, "Here you go. This will help make sense of your gods." They introduced the idea that Jupiter, Neptune, and Vulcan were brothers, that Saturn and Rhea were their parents, and that Jupiter had all sorts of children of his own. Whenever I think about how the Italic gods were matched up with the Greek ones, I can't help but wonder how that pairing happened so neatly. I mean, the myths line up almost too well, which raises a pretty interesting question. The truth, though, is that the overlap wasn't nearly as perfect as it looks on paper. Most of the time, the Romans connected their gods to the Greek ones simply because they shared a few traits, not because they had the same origins or stories. Take Venus, for example. Among the old Italic tribes, she originally watched over gardens and fertility. Only later, after the Greeks started influencing Roman culture, did she shift into the role of a love goddess like Aphrodite. Jupiter, too, began as nothing more than a sky deity, not some thunder-wielding king. But once folks decided he matched Zeus, he suddenly became the father of the gods and the ruler of lightning storms. Vulcan started out as a god of fire and volcanic forces, but after being linked with Hephaestus, he picked up the identity of a divine blacksmith. Even when there were similarities, plenty of Roman gods simply didn't have any Greek counterpart at all. Quirinus, for instance, was an early and extremely important Roman war god, right up there with Mars, and yet the Greeks had nobody who matched him. Then you've got Janus, the two-faced god of beginnings and transitions, Pomona, the goddess of fruitfulness, Vertumnus, who looked after the turning of the seasons, Terminus, protector of boundaries, and Mephitis, who was tied to noxious vapors and hot springs. That's just scratching the surface. And to be fair, the Greek pantheon had its own collection of gods with no Roman equivalent, like Morpheus, the god of dreams, Kratos, the spirit of strength, and no, not that Kratos, and Astrea, who embodied justice. So even though the Romans borrowed Greek myths and patched them onto their own gods, the roles and purposes of those gods often drifted far apart. Greek religion loved beauty, drama, emotion, and the whole messy spectrum of human feelings. Roman religion, though, was grounded in duty, structure, and power, pretty much a direct mirror of Roman society. War is a perfect example. Sure, the Greeks fought plenty, but their battles weren't as organized or as aggressively expansionist as Rome's. Their society didn't revolve around the military the way Rome's did, which is why Ares stayed a somewhat minor character in Greek mythology. You can probably think of a few stories about him, but he never took center stage. Mars, on the other hand, was one of Rome's top gods, right up there with Venus, as both a divine ancestor and a protector of the Roman people. And Mars wasn't alone. Other war-related deities like Quirinus and Bellona commanded huge respect. Even gods who had nothing to do with battle originally could still take on military roles, like Venus Victrix, Venus the Victorious. To the Romans, divine beings filled the world. Spirits and gods lived in lakes and rivers, forests and swamps, springs and groves. Every part of nature felt alive and sacred. Out of all these countless entities, some of the most important were the Lares and the Genii. There were Lares who protected the Roman state as a whole, but most families knew them as household guardians, spirits who watched over a single home. Every person also had a genius, a personal protective spirit tied to their identity and fate. Every Roman home had a little shrine called a lararium, where a figurine of the family's genius stood in the center, flanked by two Lares holding cornucopias, symbols of plenty and good fortune. Another thing that made Roman religion unique was the way it treated virtues. Things like bravery, harmony, loyalty, modesty, and discipline as actual gods. These weren't characters with stories and personalities. They were ideas made divine, and yet Romans still built temples for them, offered sacrifices, and treated them like real deities. On top of that, there were what I like to think of as momentary gods. Divine figures who presided over tiny slices of everyday life. Annona looked after the grain supply. Subigus was the god connected to the wedding night. Vatican, believe it or not, was the one who opened a baby's mouth for its very first cry. Just about every action, no matter how small, had a divine overseer. There were even two goddesses, Abiona and Audiona, who handled leaving the house and coming back home. Another major part of Roman religion was ritual. It wasn't so much about personal belief or heartfelt emotion. What mattered was doing the rite correctly. Every word, every movement, every offering had to be perfect. If even one detail slipped, the whole ritual was invalid and had to be done again over and over until everything matched the proper form. Only then could someone hope to earn favor from the gods. There's a great example of this mindset in the old story of the first dancer. According to the tale, a terrible plague once hit Rome, and nobody could figure out why the gods were angry. Then a plebeian named Latinus had a dream where Jupiter appeared to him and said, "I am displeased with the first dancer." Latinus had no clue what that meant, so he kept quiet. Jupiter came back again, this time threatening punishment, but Latinus still said nothing. The next day, his son died in the plague, and soon after, Latinus fell deathly ill himself. In desperation, he had his family carry him on a stretcher to the Senate. There, he finally told the whole story. The senators gathered together, thinking hard about Jupiter's message. Then someone remembered that not long ago, there had been a grand procession in Jupiter's honor. And during that exact event, a patrician had ordered one of his slaves executed, whipping the man as he was marched toward his death. By pure coincidence, the condemned man ended up walking right in front of Jupiter's sacred procession. Once the senators put the pieces together, the message became obvious. The sacred procession had been polluted, and the whole ritual was thrown off. So they performed the ceremony again, this time exactly the way it should have been done. And, according to the old legend, the plague stopped almost immediately. Unlike the Greeks, the Romans took divination and prophecy incredibly seriously, a tradition they picked up straight from the Etruscans. There were plenty of ways to read the will of the gods, but two practices stood above the rest: haruspicy and augury. Haruspicy was the art of interpreting divine messages by examining the entrails of a sacrificed animal. It was seen as the most accurate method and could only be practiced by priests who had been trained for years, specialists known as haruspices. The ritual usually involved sacrificing a black ram, removing its liver, boiling it according to strict rules, and then examining it in detail. Every shape, mark, or oddity was believed to carry some signal from the gods. It was a complicated craft, and mastering it took a lifetime. Augury, which involved interpreting the behavior of birds, was much more common. Ordinary Romans could watch birds on their own for personal decisions, but official auguries were carried out by priests called augurs. Yes, that's where the word inauguration comes from. When it came to public business, only magistrates, quaestors, praetors, or consuls had the authority to request auguries. Any omen might matter. A bird's flight path, its call, how it pecked at food, or even the way it moved on the ground. The point of Roman divination wasn't to predict the far-off future. It was to judge whether the gods approved of a specific action on a specific day. Before declaring war, for example, the Romans always took auguries. If the signs weren't favorable, they'd try again the next day, and again until the gods finally gave the green light. One well-known story captures this mindset perfectly. Before the Battle of Drepana, the Roman commander Publius Claudius Pulcher performed the required augury, but the sacred chickens refused to eat, a terrible omen. Pulcher, brushing off the ritual, joked, "If they won't eat, let them drink," and ordered the chickens tossed into the sea. The battle that followed was a catastrophe. The Carthaginians wiped out the Roman fleet, and people later said the gods had punished Pulcher for mocking the sacred rites. Another important thing to understand is that Roman priests weren't a separate social class. Priesthoods were often honorary or political roles held by influential men. Caesar and Sulla both served as flamens of Jupiter. Augustus later became Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of the College of Pontiffs. Scipio Africanus, the great general who defeated Hannibal, was part of the Salii, a priestly order devoted to Mars. Even Cicero, Rome's most famous orator, served as an augur. What might surprise you is how few priests there actually were. In Caesar's time, when the Roman Republic had around 4 million people, there were only 147 official priestly positions in the entire state. In the end, Roman religion was a fascinating and original system, deeply influenced by the Greeks and Etruscans, yes, but far from being a simple copy. It mixed old Italic traditions with foreign ideas and shaped them into something uniquely Roman. And if you've stuck with me all the way through this, I really appreciate it. If you enjoy following along with stories about ancient civilizations, feel free to like and subscribe. We put out new episodes every week. You can support our work on Patreon or become a channel member on YouTube, where you'll get early access to new content, behind-the-scenes looks, and more. You can even send a super thanks if you'd like to give us an extra boost. If you prefer listening on the go, check out our podcast, Parabellum History, It's available on all the major podcast platforms. Thanks again for being here, and I hope to see you next time.